The woman who stepped off that dusty train was supposed to be my wife. Instead, she was a beautiful lie. The telegram said her name was Clarice Knox. Educated, no family, willing to travel west. It was simple, direct. Just what a man like me, Thorne Shepard, needed. But the woman standing on that platform in her fine blue dress, carrying a single leather bag, was anything but simple. Mail-order brides came west because they had to. They were desperate, or hungry, or running from something terrible. They didn't arrive with silk gloves and the posture of a queen. They didn't refuse my offer to carry their bag with a polite smile that never, not for a second, reached their eyes. And they sure as hell didn't flinch when I mentioned the long ride to my ranch. Like the very idea of a bumpy wagon was a personal insult. Clarice Knox had agreed to marry a stranger and travel 1,000 miles to the middle of nowhere. But as she stood there in the afternoon heat, one hand pressed subtly against her chest while she caught her breath, I knew she wasn't here for a new beginning. She was here for an end. The woman about to become my wife was hiding something. Something big. Something that made her hands tremble when she thought I wasn't looking. As I helped her into my wagon, feeling how shockingly light she was beneath that expensive dress, I realized whatever brought Clarice Knox to my doorstep wasn't hope. It was fear. A deep, dark fear that had chased her all the way across the country. The ride to the ranch was 15 miles of nothing. Barren hills, scattered brush, and a whole lot of silence. I kept the wagon steady, but I couldn't stop stealing glances at her. She sat with her spine straight as a gun barrel, gripping the wagon seat with both hands, her knuckles bone white beneath the silk. She didn't complain about the jolts. She didn't complain about the dust that coated her dress in a fine brown powder. Most women would have been talking a mile a minute, asking about the ranch, the town, anything to fill the space between two strangers about to be married. Not Clarice. She watched the horizon with a strange intensity, like she was memorizing it. Every rock, every twisted tree, every dip in the land. It wasn't curiosity, it was strategy. A jackrabbit darted across our path, startling the horses. I had to pull hard on the reins, and the sudden lurch threw her against my shoulder. I felt again how thin she was, how fragile. She pulled away in a heartbeat, but not before I caught the scent. It was lavender soap, clean and sweet. But underneath it, there was something else. Something sharp, medicinal. It was a smell that twisted my gut with questions I didn't know how to ask. The sun beat down, and sweat beaded on her forehead. She pressed a delicate handkerchief to her lips. When she pulled it away, I saw it. Just for a second, a dark, ugly stain. Red. She folded it away in an instant, hiding it in her sleeve. But it was too late. I'd already seen it. My throat went dry as dust. I knew that look, that careful way of hiding pain. My first wife, Sarah, had done the same thing in her final months, pretending to be strong while her body was betraying her, piece by piece. But Sarah had been sick for years. This woman, this Clarice, had just traveled halfway across the country. Her letters were written in a steady, confident hand. Dying people don't plan futures. They don't marry strangers and move to a ranch where the nearest doctor is a 2-day ride away. They stay home. They say their goodbyes. They don't run towards the empty plains like they're a sanctuary. When we finally pulled up to the ranch house, a squat building of weathered wood and stone, she studied it with that same unnerving focus. "It's perfect," she said, and her voice was filled with a strange, breathless relief. I helped her down from the wagon. She was so light she felt like a child. She paused to catch her breath, one hand on the wagon wheel, the other pressed to her chest again. As I reached for her bag, our eyes met. Really met for the first time. They were the color of a winter sky, pale and distant. But underneath all that ice, I saw something that made my chest ache. Gratitude. The kind of gratitude a drowning person gives the one who pulls them from the water. The inside of the house was simple. Rough-hewn furniture, a big stone fireplace. Clean, but empty. Clarice moved through the room like a ghost, running her gloved fingers over the wooden table, the back of a chair. She stopped at the mantelpiece. There was a single photograph there in a silver frame. A young woman with dark hair and kind eyes standing next to a younger, happier version of me. "Your first wife," she said. It wasn't a question. Sarah, I nodded. I watched her expecting, I don't know what, jealousy, resentment. Most women would have wanted the picture gone, but Clarice just traced the frame with one finger. A real smile, the first one I'd seen, touched her lips. She was beautiful. You loved her very much. Again, a statement, not a question. She knew. Something about her gentleness pulled me closer. For 8 years, I said, the words feeling rusty in my throat. Lost her 2 winters ago. Consumption. The word hung in the air between us like a guillotine. I watched her face, searching for a flicker of fear, of recognition. Nothing. Her expression was calm, serene, but her hand, almost without her knowing, went to her chest again, that same protective gesture. She turned away from the picture and continued her tour of the room, but her movements were different now, slower, more deliberate. I should show you the bedroom, I said, and then felt my neck burn. We were married, but only on paper. I'd made that clear in my letters. She'd have her own space. That's very considerate, she replied, and her tone suggested she'd expected anything but consideration. The bedroom was small, with a single window looking out over the endless prairie. She went straight to it, standing there for a long moment, watching the wind ripple through the grass like an ocean. How far is the nearest town? She asked, her back still to me. 15 miles the way we came. Why? She didn't answer. Instead, she opened her single bag and began to unpack with a slow, careful precision. A few dresses, some personal items, and a small wooden box. She placed it on the bedside table like it was made of glass. When she opened the lid, just for a second, I saw what was inside. Rows of small glass bottles, folded papers, medicine. She snapped it shut before I could get a better look. Just curious about neighbors, she said, but her hands were trembling again, and when she thought I wasn't looking, she gripped the windowsill so hard her knuckles turned white, as if the whole world was spinning, and that piece of wood was the only thing holding her up. A cold, hard certainty settled in my gut. This woman hadn't come here to find a husband. She had come here to disappear, and I had a terrible feeling I knew why. That night I made beans and cornbread. She sat at the table, her hands folded in her lap, looking even more fragile in a simple gray dress. The lamplight carved shadows into the hollows of her cheeks. When I put the plate in front of her, she looked at the food with a strange expression. Not hunger, more like resignation. She ate slowly, tiny bites, as if the act of chewing took all her concentration. Tell me about the ranch, she said, her voice a soft murmur in the quiet room. Built it 12 years ago, I told her. Sarah and we had plans, more buildings, cattle, but I trailed off, surprised at how easy it was to talk to this woman, this stranger. I breed horses now, break Mustangs. It's solitary work, suits me. She nodded like she understood solitude. What about you? I asked. Your letter said you were a teacher. In Philadelphia, she confirmed, for young ladies from good families. I taught them to think for themselves, not just memorize rules. A ghost of a smile touched her lips. It made me rather unpopular with their parents. There was a flicker of steel in her voice then, a strength that didn't match the frail body it came from. After dinner, she insisted on washing the dishes. I watched her, leaning against the doorframe. She had to pause frequently, resting her hands on the edge of the wash basin, her breathing growing shallow. As she reached up to put a plate on the shelf, her sleeve fell back, and I saw it, a dark, ugly bruise on her forearm, purple and yellow against her pale skin. She saw me looking and yanked her sleeve down in a flash. I bruise easily, she said, her voice tight. Always have. The lie was so obvious it was like a third person sitting at the table with us. I'd seen enough injuries in my life to know a fall from a horse. This wasn't that. This was different. This was the kind of mark left by a hand, a fist. When it was time to say goodnight, she passed by me in the narrow hallway. Her hand brushed my arm, a touch so light it could have been an accident, but her fingers lingered for just a second too long. Thank you, she said, looking up at me, for making me feel welcome. But her eyes said more. They said, thank you for not asking questions. Thank you for not being the monster I was expecting. And I realized with a jolt that whatever she was running from wasn't just an illness, it was a man. And that medicinal smell clinging to her wasn't just for a cough, it was for pain. The kind of pain that leaves bruises you can see and scars you can't. I woke before dawn, my usual habit, but I lay there in the dark, just listening for the sounds from her room. When I finally got up and went to the kitchen, she was already there, sitting at the table in her nightgown, a shawl around her shoulders, staring out the window. In the pale pre-dawn light, she looked like a ghost. Couldn't sleep? I asked softly. She shook her head, her fingers wrapped around a teacup. I'm not used to the silence, and she said, in the city there are always sounds, carriages, voices. Here, the quiet is so loud. A small, real smile touched her lips. And the stars. I've never seen so many. We sat in a comfortable silence as I made coffee. But as the light grew, I could see the deep, bruised circles under her eyes, the faint tremor in her hands as she lifted her cup. Then she did it again. That quick, furtive movement, pressing the handkerchief to her mouth, hiding the evidence. Clarice, I said, my voice low. Are you all right? Her eyes met mine across the table. For a second, I thought she was going to break. I saw the truth right there, swimming in her pale blue eyes, desperate to get out. Her lips even parted. But then a mask slammed down. The walls went back up. I'm just tired from the journey, she said. It was another lie, but this one felt different, softer, almost an apology. I wanted to push her. I wanted to ask about the medicine, the bruises, the blood. But she looked like a wounded animal, finally convinced it had found a safe place to rest. One wrong move and she'd bolt right back out into the storm. I was thinking, she said, deliberately changing the subject. I could help with the chores, cooking, mending. I'd like to earn my place here. You don't need to earn anything, I said gruffly. We're married, I gestured vaguely, even if it's not traditional. She let out a small laugh, which turned into a hacking cough she tried to smother. I think we passed traditional the moment you answered my letter. There was a bravery in that broken laugh that hit me right in the chest. A strange, fierce desire to protect this woman rose up in me. Protect her from what? I still wasn't sure. But I knew it was coming for her. When she stood up to get more tea, she swayed on her feet, grabbing the back of the chair to steady herself. It was a tiny movement, almost invisible. But I saw it. I was starting to realize I saw everything she did. I couldn't stop watching her, trying to piece together the puzzle she presented. And the more pieces I found, the more certain I was that the picture they made was one of terrible danger, a secret that could get her killed. Over the next few days, we fell into a strange routine. I'd work the horses, she'd manage the house. She was a surprisingly good cook, and she organized my chaotic life with a quiet efficiency that made the place feel like a home for the first time since Sarah died. But I saw the signs. Everywhere. The way she'd gripped the porch railing for support when she stepped outside. The way she had to sit down halfway through making a meal. The sounds at night. A soft, persistent cough that seemed to be getting worse. One night I saw a light under her door long after midnight. I crept closer, my heart pounding. I could hear her moving around, then a soft thud, followed by a choked sob. The next morning she had a fresh bruise high on her cheekbone, clumsily hidden with powder. I walked into a door in the dark, she said, her eyes refusing to meet mine. Another lie. The lies were stacking up like firewood, ready to burn the whole damn house down. On the fourth day, I was coming back from checking the south fence line when I found her sitting on the front steps, just staring out at the prairie. The look on her face, it was pure, soul-deep sadness. It stopped me dead in my tracks. She looked like she was saying goodbye to the world. When she noticed me, she straightened up, forcing a smile. It's so beautiful here, she said, her voice a little too bright. So peaceful. Different from Philadelphia, I said, watching her closely. Very different. She stood up, using the railing to pull herself to her feet. I think I was ready for different. That night after dinner, she asked me about Sarah. Not about her sickness, but about her life. What she was like. What made her laugh. It was like she was trying to understand the woman whose place she had taken. She loved to garden, I found myself saying. Tried to grow vegetables out here. Most everything died in the heat, but she never gave up. What grew best? Clarice asked, her eyes fixed on the fire. Herb, I said. Lavender, mint. She said they were good for medicine, for teas. At the word medicine, something flickered across her face, a shadow, gone in an instant. What about you? I asked, turning the question back on her. Anyone ever look after you? She went very still. The silence stretched out, filled only by the crackle of the fire. When she finally spoke, her voice was a whisper. I've become quite good at looking after myself. But as she said it, her hand went to her chest, and I saw the lie plain as day in the tightness around her eyes. Whatever hell she'd climbed out of to get here, she'd done it alone. And watching her there, so fragile and yet so fierce, I admitted a terrifying truth to myself. I was starting to fall for this woman of secrets, and I knew with a certainty that chilled my bones that I was going to lose her. I decided I needed to know the truth, all of it. The next afternoon, while she was resting, a deep, exhausted sleep she fell into every day, I did something I'm not proud of. I went into her room. My hands were shaking as I walked over to the small wooden box on her nightstand. I hesitated. This felt like a betrayal, but the image of that new bruise on her face, the sound of her crying in the night, it pushed me forward. I opened the box. The smell of medicinal herbs hit me first. Inside were the bottles I'd glimpsed before, filled with dark liquids and powders. But underneath them, tucked away in a false bottom, was a sheaf of papers. They weren't letters. They were newspaper clippings, all from the Philadelphia Ledger. I pulled one out. The headline jumped out at me, stark and black against the page. Shipping magnate found dead. Police suspect foul play. My blood ran cold. I kept reading. The article was about the suspicious death of a man named Alistair Finch, a wealthy, powerful man. It mentioned he was survived by his only daughter. But her name wasn't Clarice Knox. It was Eleanor Finch. The clipping was dated just 6 weeks ago. I dug deeper. Another headline. Finch Iris vanishes. Fiancé pleads for her safe return. There was a sketch of the missing woman, and I was staring into the face of my wife. Clarice. Eleanor. My heart was hammering against my ribs. Fiancé? She told me she had no family. No one. The article named the fiancé, a prominent businessman named Julian Croft. It described his grief, his desperation to find his beloved Eleanor. It painted him as a heartbroken hero. But then I saw the last clipping, tucked at the very bottom. It was smaller, from a different, more salacious paper. Croft Enterprises under investigation. Rumors of fraud, intimidation. It all clicked into place with a sickening thud. She wasn't Clarice Knox. She was Eleanor Finch, a missing heiress. Her father was murdered, and her grieving fiancé was a dangerous criminal. The bruises, the fear, the running. It wasn't an illness. It was him. He had done this to her. She wasn't dying. She was hiding for her life. And I had just married the one woman in America this Julian Croft was desperate to find and to silence. I put the clippings back, my hands trembling with a rage so cold and sharp it felt like swallowing glass. I closed the box and backed out of the room, my mind reeling. Everything was a lie. Her name, her story, but the fear in her eyes, the pain, that was real. I had to confront her. I couldn't protect her if I didn't know the whole truth. I waited until she woke up. I found her in the kitchen trying to make tea, her movements slow and pained. I stood in the doorway, my arms crossed. Eleanor, I said. The name dropped into the quiet room like a stone. She froze, her back to me. The teacup slipped from her fingers and shattered on the floor. She didn't even flinch. Slowly she turned to face me. The mask was gone. All that was left was a raw, hunted fear. Her face was ashen. How did you... Your box, I said, my voice hard. The newspaper clippings. Tears welled in her eyes, spilling down her pale cheeks. I was going to tell you, she whispered. I swear I was. Tell me what? That your name is a lie? That your father was just murdered? That you have a fiancé back in Philadelphia who's looking for you? Each question was like a hammer blow. She flinched with every word. He's not my fiancé, she choked out. Not anymore. He, he killed my father. He was stealing from his company. My father found out, and Julian, he killed him. He made it look like a heart ailment. And you? I asked, stepping closer. What did he do to you? She looked away, shame and fear warring on her face. She wrapped her arms around herself. He wanted my inheritance. He wanted control of the company. When I refused to marry him after my father's death, he locked me in my room. He told everyone I was mad with grief. He had a doctor, his doctor, who told me I was sick, dying. The story came pouring out of her in a broken, desperate torrent. He hit me. He told me if I ever told anyone the truth, he'd kill me just like he killed my father. I knew he would. I had to get away. So you answered my ad, I finished for her. You became Clarice Knox, a woman with no past. Such one a room. I just wanted to disappear, she sobbed. I thought if I came out here, so far away, he would never find me. I thought I could be safe. And then her legs gave out. She collapsed, not in a faint, but in a heap of pure exhaustion and despair. The cough that had been haunting the edges of our lives erupted from her, a terrible, racking sound that shook her whole body. I rushed forward, catching her before she hit the floor. I carried her to the sofa, her body limp and light in my arms. The coughing wouldn't stop. She pressed her handkerchief to her mouth, and this time, when she pulled it away, it was soaked in bright, fresh blood. Not spots, a flood. Thorn, she gasped, her eyes wide with terror, her hand clutching my shirt. The doctor, he said it was consumption. He said I only had months. It hit me then, the final horrifying piece of the puzzle, the illness. It wasn't a lie to cover her escape. It was real, or at least part of it was. This Julian Croft, he wasn't just a murderer and a thief. He was a monster. He hadn't been content to just beat her. He was killing her, slowly from the inside out. For the next week, she was worse than ever. The confessions seemed to have broken the last of her strength. She was too weak to get out of bed. The cough was constant, and the fever burned hot. I did what I could. I brewed the herbal teas Sarah had used. I sat with her, bathed her forehead with cool water, and listened to her ragged breathing in the long, dark nights. She told me everything about Julian, how he had charmed everyone in Philadelphia society, including her father, how his cruelty only came out behind closed doors, how he'd started giving her a special tonic for her nerves after her father's death, prescribed by his personal physician. A tonic that made her weaker and sicker every day. It was poison. He was poisoning her. He'd invented the consumption diagnosis as a cover. That way, when she finally died, no one would ask any questions. An orphaned heiress, dead of a broken heart and a common disease. He would inherit everything. It was the perfect crime. I was filled with a helpless rage. We were so isolated. The nearest town was 15 miles away, and the doctor there was a drunkard who was more likely to kill a patient than save them. To get her real help, we'd have to go to Cheyenne, a 4-day ride at least, a ride she would never survive in her condition. We were trapped. Every day I watched her fade a little more. The light in her winter sky eyes grew dimmer. She was so thin, her bones looked sharp beneath her skin. I felt like I was watching Sarah die all over again. But this was worse. Sarah's sickness had been a tragedy of nature. This was murder, happening in slow motion, right in my own house. I spent my days tending to her and my nights staring out the window, a shotgun resting across my lap. I watched the horizon, praying no one would appear, knowing that sooner or later someone would. A man like Julian Croft wouldn't give up on a fortune that large. He'd have people looking for her, Pinkertons, bounty hunters, thugs. It was only a matter of time. One afternoon, about a week after her collapse, I saw it. A dust cloud on the horizon. A single rider coming fast. My blood turned to ice. It was happening. I grabbed the shotgun, checked the load, and went outside, positioning myself on the porch where he'd have to pass me to get to the door. I watched him approach, a tall man on a powerful black horse. He wasn't dressed like a cowboy. He wore a city suit, coated in dust, and a bowler hat. He rode right up to the porch and reined in his horse, looking down at me and the shotgun I held leveled at his chest. He didn't look like a thug. He looked official. "Thorne Shepard?" he asked, his voice calm and steady. I just nodded, my thumb resting on the hammer of the shotgun. "My name is Agent Davies," he said, reaching slowly into his coat. "Pinkerton National Detective Agency." He pulled out a leather wallet and flipped it open. The badge inside gleamed in the sun. My gut clenched. He was here for her. "I'm looking for a woman," Davies said, his eyes scanning the ranch house behind me. "Goes by the name of Clarice Knox. Or maybe Eleanor Finch." I didn't say a word. I just tightened my grip on the shotgun. "She's a witness," Davies continued, his voice even, "to the murder of her father, Alistair Finch." That surprised me. I'd expected him to call her a criminal, a runaway, something to justify dragging her back. "Witness to what?" I asked, my voice a low growl. "Witness to his poisoning," the agent said, "at the hands of his business partner, Julian Croft. We've been investigating Croft for months. Fraud, extortion, murder's a new addition to his list. Miss Finch is the only one who can testify against him. We believe he's the one who arranged her disappearance." He paused, his gaze sharp. "And we have reason to believe he's trying to silence her. Permanently." He reached into his coat again and pulled out a piece of paper. A wanted poster. But the face on it wasn't Eleanor's. It was a handsome, smiling man with cold, dead eyes. Julian Croft. Wanted for murder. Relief washed over me so fast it almost made my knees buckle. He wasn't here to take her back to Croft. He was here to protect her. "She's here," I said, lowering the shotgun. "But she's sick. Very sick." Davies' face hardened. "How sick?" "Dying," I said, and the word tasted like ash in my mouth. "He was poisoning her. She thinks she has consumption." Davies swore under his breath, a sharp, violent sound. He swung down from his horse. "Let me see her. There may be a chance. The doctor who worked with Croft, we arrested him last week. He confessed everything, including the poison he was using. It's a rare botanical extract from South America, slow-acting, designed to mimic the symptoms of consumption. But he also told us something else." He looked me straight in the eye, and for the first time I saw a flicker of hope. "He told us there's an antidote." The agent explained everything as we hurried inside. The doctor, trying to save his own skin, had given them the formula for both the poison and the antidote. The Pinkertons had chemists working on it back in Philadelphia. But the ingredients were rare. It would take time. Time Eleanor didn't have. "Her testimony is crucial," Davies said, standing over her bed, his face grim as he took in her shallow breathing and feverish flush. "Without her, Croft will walk free. He has half the judges in the city in his pocket. But if we can get her to Cheyenne, there's a doctor there, a specialist. He might be able to stabilize her, to buy us some time until the antidote arrives." A choice stood before me, clear and terrible. To save her, I had to move her. But moving her could kill her. The 4-day journey across the rough country, it seemed impossible. I looked down at her face, so pale against the pillow. I saw the ghost of the strong, defiant woman who had stepped off that train. The woman who had run 1,000 miles to find a place to be safe. "She won't make it in a wagon," I said flatly. "It's too slow, too rough." "Then we take the horses," Davies said. "We ride hard and fast. It's her only shot." "She can't ride," I argued. "Look at her. She can barely sit up." "She won't have to," I said, a desperate plan forming in my mind. "I'll carry her." Davies stared at me like I was insane. "You'll ride for 4 days, holding her in your arms? It's impossible." "Watch me," I said. There was no other way. We left within the hour. I wrapped Eleanor in every blanket I owned, creating a cocoon to protect her from the jolting and the wind. I mounted my strongest horse, a steady Mustang named Boulder, and Davies carefully lifted her tiny, frail body up to me. I settled her in front of me, her head resting against my chest, her breathing a faint, fluttering whisper against my shirt. She was barely conscious, her eyes half open, clouded with fever. "Thorne," she murmured, her voice so weak I could hardly hear it. "It's all right, Eleanor," I whispered back, my arms tightening around her. "I've got you. Just hold on." And then we rode. We rode like the devil himself was on our heels. Davies set a brutal pace, pushing our horses to their limit. We rode through the day and deep into the night, stopping only for a few minutes at a time to water the horses and try to force a little broth between Eleanor's lips. The world became a blur of dust and wind in the constant, punishing rhythm of the horse's gallop. My arms ached, then went numb. My back screamed in protest, but I never loosened my grip. I held her against me, trying to shield her from every jolt, trying to pour my own strength into her failing body. She drifted in and out of consciousness. Sometimes she'd murmur things I couldn't understand. Other times she'd cough, a weak, rattling sound that tore at my heart. During one of our brief stops on the second night, her eyes fluttered open and seemed to focus on my face. "Sarah," she whispered, "is it beautiful? Where you are?" My throat closed up. "It's very beautiful, Eleanor," I managed to say, "but you're not going there yet. You have to fight." A single tear traced a path through the dust on her cheek. "I'm so tired of fighting," she breathed, and then her eyes closed again. On the third day we saw them, two riders, far behind us, but closing the distance. "Crofts' men," Davies grunted, his hand going to the pistol on his hip. "He must have found out you were here, found out we were coming for you." They were gaining on us. Our horses were exhausted. Eleanor was a dead weight in my arms, her breathing growing fainter. I knew she was slipping away. We couldn't outrun them. We had to make a stand. Davies pointed to a narrow canyon up ahead, a bottleneck of rocks and sheer cliffs. "In there," he yelled over the wind. "It's our only chance to funnel them." We spurred our tired horses, racing for the canyon entrance. We made it inside just as the first bullets started kicking up dust around our horses' hooves. I rode deeper in, looking for cover, while Davies dismounted, pulling his rifle from its scabbard. He took a position behind a large boulder and started returning fire. I found a small alcove in the rock wall, just big enough to shelter us. I gently laid Eleanor on the ground, her body terrifyingly still. Her skin was cold and clammy. I couldn't find her pulse. "No," I whispered, shaking her gently. "Eleanor, stay with me. Please, don't you leave me." I heard the crack of Davies' rifle, followed by an angry shout from our pursuers. They were pinned down for now. I ripped a piece of my shirt and wet it from my canteen, bathing her face, trying to get any response. Her eyelids fluttered. "Thorn," she breathed, her voice a thread of sound. "It's cold." I lay down beside her, pulling her against my body, trying to warm her with my own heat, while the gun battle raged just yards away. I held her and prayed, not to a God I wasn't sure I believed in, but to her. To the fierce, stubborn spirit that had carried her this far. The gunfire stopped as suddenly as it began. For a long moment, there was only a ringing silence. Then I heard Davies call my name. I left Eleanor's side and crept to the edge of the alcove. One of Crofts' men was down, his horse standing riderless. The other was gone, retreating back the way he came. But Davies was slumped against his rock, a dark stain spreading across his shoulder. "He winged me," he gasped as I reached him. "But I think the other one has lost his nerve. He won't be back soon. But more will come. We have to keep moving." He was right. We had bought ourselves time, but not much. I helped him bind his wound, and then we were moving again, pushing our horses, pushing ourselves, racing against the poison and the pursuit. The last day was a waking nightmare. Davies was pale and weak from blood loss, swaying in his saddle. Eleanor was completely unresponsive, her breathing so shallow I had to press my ear to her lips to feel it. I rode on pure instinct, my body screaming, my mind numb with fear and exhaustion. We finally crested a hill at sunset on the fourth day. And there it was, Cheyenne, a cluster of lights twinkling in the twilight like a promise. The sight gave me a final surge of adrenaline. We urged our horses down the last few miles, stumbling into the town's main street like specters from the desert. People stopped and stared at the sight of us. Two dust-caked, bloody men and the limp form of a woman. "Doctor!" Davies croaked, pointing a shaky hand at a building with a light in the window. "There!" I practically fell off my horse, still clutching Eleanor. I burst through the door of the doctor's office. He was an older man with kind eyes who took one look at us and started shouting for his wife to boil water. I laid Eleanor on his examination table. Her face was a waxy bluish white. The doctor put a stethoscope to her chest, listening intently. He looked up at me, his expression grave. "Her heart is failing," he said. "Her lungs are full of fluid. I don't know what I can do. What in God's name happened to her?" "She was poisoned," Davies said from the doorway, leaning heavily against the frame. "We need to keep her alive. An antidote is on its way from Philadelphia." The next few days were a blur of waiting and praying. The doctor, a man named Miller, was a miracle worker. He used strange concoctions of his own and every bit of medical knowledge he had to fight the poison. He never left her side. Neither did I. I sat in a chair by her bed, holding her hand, talking to her, telling her about the ranch, about the horses, telling her she was safe now, telling her to come back to me. Agent Davies had sent a wire to his office in Philadelphia, and a team of Pinkertons was on its way with the antidote. They also brought news. The man who had shot Davies had been captured. He'd talked. He'd given them the location of Julian Croft's hideout. They had him cornered. The net was closing. But it all felt meaningless if Eleanor didn't wake up. On the third night, I was dozing in the chair when I felt a faint pressure on my hand. My eyes snapped open. Her fingers were moving, closing around mine. Her eyes were open, and they were clear. The fever was gone. "Thorne," she whispered, her voice hoarse but steady. Tears streamed down my face. I couldn't speak. I just squeezed her hand, a wave of relief so powerful it felt like a physical blow washing over me. The antidote arrived 2 days later. Dr. Miller administered it, and the change was miraculous. Color returned to her cheeks. Her breathing grew strong and even. The woman who had been a ghost just days before was slowly, surely coming back to life. Agent Davies, his arm in a sling, came to see her. He told her that Julian Croft had been captured. Faced with her survival and the testimony of his hired doctor, he had confessed to everything. He would hang for the murder of her father. Justice was served. It took weeks for her to regain her strength. When she was finally able to travel, she had a choice to make. She was Eleanor Finch again, a wealthy heiress. She could go back to Philadelphia, back to her life of society and comfort, or she could come home with me. "My home is with you, Thorne," she said, her hand in mine as we stood on the train platform in Cheyenne. "If you'll still have me." She wasn't the fragile, frightened woman I had met all those weeks ago. Sickness and fear had been stripped away, revealing the steel underneath. She was strong. She was a survivor. And I loved her more than I thought it was possible to love anyone. We went back to the ranch. Her ranch now as much as mine. We were married again, this time for real by the circuit judge in town. Life settled into a new rhythm, a happy one. The house was no longer quiet. It was filled with her laughter. She never did get the hang of gardening, but she filled the house with books and music and a life I never knew I was missing. Sometimes, at night, I'd watch her sleep, and I'd think about that woman in the fine blue dress who stepped off the train. The beautiful lie who became my truth. She came west looking for a place to die, but instead, she found a reason to live. And in saving her, I had, without a doubt, saved myself. If you enjoyed this story, click the video on your screen now to watch another unforgettable tale of survival and justice in the Old West. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Your support allows us to keep finding these incredible stories and bringing them to you every week. We'll see you in the next one.